Hello, everyone, and welcome to Achieving Radical Resilience with the Veeam Data Platform. Today's webinar is sponsored by Veeam and produced by Actual Tech Media. I am Keith Ward with Actual Tech Media, and I'm thrilled to be your moderator for this especially timely presentation today. But before we get to the content, I need to let you know about a few housekeeping items that'll help you get the most out of this session. First off, we want your questions for Veeam. Just put them in the questions box in your webinar control panel, which you should see off there to your right. That Q&A panel is also the place to let us know about any technical issues you might be having. First thing you want to do is a browser refresh, which will fix most of your problems hearing or seeing anything. If that doesn't work, well, often you need to do that again. If that still doesn't work, then let us know and we will hop on and try to help you out ASAP. Second, in the handout section of your webinar control panel, you will find some great resources, including a link to Veeam's 2023 ransomware trends report, which is something they'll be discussing today in the event. You'll also find a Veeam Enterprise, a Veeam Enterprise Buyer's Guide for Data Protection. You will also find in the handout section a link to our Gorilla Guide book club, which has a vast library of books on technology topics, and those are also free as well. You'll find, in addition, a link to the Actual Tech Media Events Center, which has our calendar of upcoming events. We've got some really cool topics coming up, so I encourage you to look that over and sign up today after this for anything coming your way that looks really intriguing. All right, third, at the end of this webinar event, we will be awarding a $250 Amazon gift card to one of you. Now, you have to be in attendance during the entire live event to qualify for the prize. The official terms and conditions of the drawing can be found in the handout section. With that, why don't we get to the good stuff? It is my honor to introduce you to our presenters today. We got a couple of great ones. We have Matt Crape, Senior Technical Product Manager, and Emily Telles, Product Strategy Technologist, both with Veeam. They are ready to go. And Matt, the floor is yours. Take it away.
Perfect. Thank you for that introduction. So we're here today to talk about achieving radical resilience with the Veeam Data Platform, and we've got an action-packed agenda to go through today. We'll start off by talking about some ransomware trends. Veeam annually performs one of the largest studies around ransomware and data protection in the industry, and we'll be covering off some of the key findings that we find there. We'll also talk about navigating a cyber attack and what does that actually look like as you're going through this. We'll follow up with talking about the Veeam Data Platform and some of the newest features and enhancements are being delivered with our newest release, and not only how it can help you achieve radical resilience, but also how it will make your day-to-day life easier. We'll follow that up with some product demonstrations, and lastly, with some Q&A at the end. So with that, Emily, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk about some ransomware trends that we're seeing in the field lately.
Perfect. Thanks, Matt. Yeah, so as Matt mentioned earlier, right, so Veeam conducts every year one of the largest studies when it comes to looking at data protection trends, ransomware recovery efforts from end users, hybrid cloud. I mean, pretty much the works, right? So what you're seeing here is this is actually pulled from our data protection trends report, and this has taken place in 2023. Up on the top, you have a QR code that'll take you to the full report if you're interested. And essentially here, what we were able to do was survey ransomware event frequency for end users that had maybe had an attack or were targeted from a recent ransomware event. So here the question was, how many ransomware attacks has your organization suffered in the last 12 months? So based off of what you're seeing in this bar graph, so 15% answered none, but the majority, so 85%, had answered that they suffered at least one ransomware attack within the last 12 months. I also kind of a little bit more scarier is you see here that almost 50%, so 49%, had actually answered that they had suffered from at least 2 or 3 ransomware events within the past 12 months. So once they had suffered from the first one, either when they were going through their recovery efforts or whatever they had done to fix their event, they didn't finish, securing the rest of their environment. So maybe there was potentially another way for somebody to get back in which case they had suffered that secondary outage or that third outage. Um, Scarily enough, right? We also could see down here that some people had started to answer that they had gotten hit at least 4, 5, even 6 times. And when we start talking about ransomware, right, and the recovery efforts that go into ransomware, for some it can take anywhere from 7 weeks to 3 months to perform these recoveries and ensure that they have a clean environment to recover to, but then also that they're fixing the vulnerabilities for how the attacker had actually gotten in. So you can only imagine if you're down 2, 3, 4 times have been hit with some type of event, that effort just continues to be longer and longer and longer, and your risk of being able to get your business back online or staying in business slightly starts to deteriorate very, very quickly, right? Of those chances of being able to continue to be open. And then finally, right, more than 17%, right? So you see that here had the 4, and then only 15% had 0 attacks, right? And so that's what we want to talk about today. We want to talk about how can Veeam help you as you are facing these day-to-day threats. How can we ensure that, again, you can have some additional resiliency when it comes to those particular circumstances, and then be able to better leverage the tools that you have and work together with your security teams to ensure that you can have the cleanest and safest recovery possible. So let's talk a little bit about the breach and understanding cyber attacks. So one of the things that we want to understand is, how do these events actually take place? So what we're going to do is we're just going to look at a timeline, right? And this for all intensive purposes is just an example, right? From January to December, it could take 12 months, it could take 2 weeks. It really just depends on, how aggressive are these attackers that are trying to get your information, your data, right? But for this example, we're going to say that this attack took place over this 12-month period. So first thing is, right, threat actors, they're going to be methodical in their attack, regardless of if it takes them, a single month, 6 months, a couple of days, or a few weeks, right? So let's just see how this process works when we are starting to navigate these certain events. So first thing you're going to notice is that when threat actors do come into your environment, or when they choose a target, first thing they're going to want to do is they're going to do some observations, and they're going to do some reconnaissance. So essentially, they're doing their information gathering stage. They want to understand who their victim is, their processes, the technology that they're leveraging, what is exactly in play. So that way they know, again, how they can thwart those certain types of attacks and those different tool sets. This stage will involve things like a lot of research, right? They're going to be identifying all their targets from a people perspective. They're going to look for vulnerabilities, and if they find any, they're going to discover any third parties that are connected to that, right? They're going to look for data. What do they have access to, if anything? And then they're going to explore additional entry points, as well as maybe even create or find new ones. So this entire phase that you're going to see here can take place both online as well as offline. And then some of the things that you'll see here is that this can actually be done through penetration testing or social engineering. Is going to be some of the ways that they're going to start gathering this information. So next, what we're going to see is threat actors will start to sneak in or weaponize and deliver their payload. So during this stage, we're going to see those actors either leverage all the work they've done and use it against that identified target. from an identification standpoint, right? So when we start looking at um, identifying that target and what the weaponization could be, it could include creating either new types of malware. So that's where one thing that you start to see a lot of different types of malware strains out there, right? So this could be part of that process. And then they can also be looking at either making minor modifications to existing malware or ransomware, or finding different variants that they can use to infiltrate a target network as well as reach users. So some of the delivery options that you'll see here that I think we're all familiar with is phishing, right? So phishing emails that are containing malware or malware attachments in the subject lines, right? This can be something that could um, potentially get they can use to get into an environment, right? Because they're looking at the end users and hoping that those end users aren't cyber aware enough that they accidentally go through and click on a link that allows them to get in. And then finally, right, we can see this as once they get in, how they're going to go ahead and move forward to exploit this network a bit further. So now that we have our fish hooks, they're going to start to create this base of operations, right? And then they're going to start looking at, they're essentially just going to sit here and just monitor the environment. They're going to see how people react to different things. They're going to see what other things that they can exploit and they could possibly take advantage of, especially when they're sitting maybe dormant for now, right? And then once they do that, you're going to start seeing some additional things take place where we're going to have this lateral movement happen as well as them elevating access, right? So again, snooping around, making sure that they're not detected, trying to figure out what else they can compromise that might be seen as a higher value. So if we start thinking about, specific information that's for end users, those types of items, right? Where there's a lot of PII information that they can capture and they can gather and that they can hold at ransom for a higher value. After they do that, next they're going to do is once they figure out what their targets are and they have gotten all of their hooks in, they're going to go ahead and begin to install the ransomware on their target network and start taking control of the systems. So what you'll see here is once they get the ransomware and they've taken control over that network, they're going to begin carrying out all their objectives that they've created during this first initial beginning stage. And they're going to use ransomware as that extortion tool. So we're going to see this process start to build out. And next, they're going to show you that ransomware declared, right? So we're going to see that that data has now been encrypted, and you're going to have that ransomware note to either pay them what they want, or they're going to either release and or not give you the encryption keys for that. So again, just a quick timeline for how that cyber attack is happening. But some of the things in here that we want to pay particular attention to, right, is when we start seeing this from a standpoint over a long period of time and where backup and things like data protection can help, right, is that we have these little backup points that are happening all throughout this entire life cycle. So how can we use those to our advantage to not only understand where can we recover data that might not have any of those vulnerabilities built in, but also where can we start to look for those indicators of compromise based off of this timeline and how it's happening here. So that goes up to embracing the breach, right? So this is something that we want to start to understand a little bit further to be able to make sure that not only do we understand how a cyber attack is going to work, but how do we be better prepared for it? Because now, as you saw in the earlier slide for how many people have gotten attacked by a ransomware event or have had something happen during a ransomware event, right? It was a strong 85%. So that right there should just be a good indicator to say that yes, there's a good likelihood that our company may or may not be a victim of ransomware or a cyber event within the coming future. So here what we want to do is just embrace that breach, because if we embrace the breach, then we have a better understanding of how we can be better prepared for when that event takes place. So this principle of assuming the breach, it's essentially just a mindset, right? This is going to guide us from security investments that we're going to make. This is going to guide us for design decisions that we put into effect for our operations. This is also going to ensure that we have security policies put in place to help us be better prepared for these events. So assume breach, this principle helps us to not only limit the trust placed in applications, services, and identities and networks by just treating them all, both internal and external, as not secure and probably already compromised, right? So if we're doing that, then that helps us to have some better cybersecurity design principles. So some of those cybersecurity design principles that you want to have is A, establishing the context before we're actually designing a system. So you want to make sure that we understand how we want to design something based off of, what we're trying to achieve and what our end goal is going to be. So again, having that embracing of the breach and understanding that this is not going to be a checkbox that's just going to prevent any type of cyber event from happening to us. Instead, being very focused on it, this is what this portion is going to help us with understanding better of. Next is making compromise difficult. So essentially, we want to do everything we possibly can to ensure that these attackers can't just get into our environment, right? So if that's going to be leveraging different security designs or different user roles and access scopes, that's what's going to help us here to kind of slow down that elevation of access and roles and privileges. Make disruption difficult, right? So having secondary or multiple disaster recovery sites, leveraging some of those different types of storage targets that'll be able to help us when it comes to having some of that additional redundancy. Make compromise detection easier, using multiple different security tools to be able to identify when these potential threats can happen, right? We're not relying on just one single detection type of program in order to get the access to that. We want to make sure that we're layering our security approach here. And then finally, reduce the impact of compromise. So if we are compromised, what's the percentage of impact that we can reduce that to ensure that it's not everything, it's only a subset of workloads. So that way we can, again, continue on to only have to focus on that and be able to have business continue to run as effectively as possible. So a lot of these good design principles are something that you can find on the NIST website, on CISA. So some of these will be going through from a government perspective that you can find some of these foundational blocks. So let's talk about the Veeam Data Platform security capabilities that I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Matt to walk through for us.
Perfect. Yeah, thanks for that walkthrough, Emily. One thing that always stands out to me is it's clear that ransomware is not necessarily just a drive-by thing anymore. There's a lot of instances where, yes, you just send out these, phishing attempts, and if you get something, great. But there's also a lot of things that are now targeted, right? You're getting to know the customer, you're spending all that time in their environment, really trying to um, break through and at the end of the day hold their data ransom. So there's a lot that's going into this, and that's all to say that ransomware really is a huge problem now, and it's not just something that you can brush off or brush under the rug anymore. It's something that really does need attention. So that's really where the Veeam data platform comes in. Some of you folks who are longtime Veeam customers, you might have seen us start talking about the Veeam data platform during our V12 launch event. Emily, if I could get you to advance the slide there. Perfect. Thank you. So at the end of the day, backup and recovery is critical, but it's just not enough anymore, right? You really need to build a multi-layered approach. And that's where Veeam Data Platform comes in. We're able to provide you the backup and recovery through Veeam Backup and Replication, which has been an industry leader for many years now. And then when you're able to stack on monitoring and analytics to look for things that might be out of the ordinary. So it's great to know that everything is functioning and running okay, but you also need to be able to identify the anomalies in your environment. Maybe things like, why is that backup file so much bigger now? Or maybe it's just a matter of auditing changes. How do you handle that? That's really where Veeam One comes in to provide that engine, to provide that monitoring and analytics that organizations need today. Now, that's all fine and dandy, but at the end of the day, it's really the recovery that we're concerned about. We need to make sure our backups are safe. We need to watch the environment, but how do we recover things, especially at scale? So that's really where Veeam Recovery Orchestrator is going to give you the edge that you need in order to achieve these things. Be able to build out your recovery plans, to be able to test them, to give you the confidence that you really need that if something goes wrong, you're able to get things back up and running and hit your SLAs. So, with the release of V12 back in early 2023, we introduced a lot of new security features. Things like multi-factor authentication, right? Making sure that when somebody's logging on, they actually are who they say they are. Um, I've been talking to a lot of customers about the best practices analyzer. They love how straightforward this is, being able to click a button and seeing, where are you from a posture standpoint. Hopefully everything's all green check marks. If they're not, hopefully you're able to get through there and remediate things to get you to green. So there's been a huge push towards security. And we've taken that with the Veeam Data Platform 23H2 release and actually pushed that even further. So, from a detect and identify standpoint, we're introducing lots of new capabilities. I think top of mind for pretty much everyone has been the malware detection engine. So, what's really neat about this is it's able to perform an inline malware detection. Why is this important? Because it brings discovery of potential threats closer to the time of infection. Because we're doing this as part of the backups, it's not impacting your production workloads. So the security teams go love this because they may have, let's say, some scanners today on there, but they might incur some sort of hit to the performance. Being able to add this as an additional measure while it's not on your production workload will definitely make a lot of application owners much, much happier. But because we're also about tearing down silos and bringing the backup administrators closer to the security team, we've also got lots of capabilities to allow you to do some proactive threat hunting. So we're able to do things, for example, like do event forwarding to external SIM systems. So we can take all the events that are happening within Veeam Backup Replication, Veeam One, for example, and send them out to a SIM system that you may already have in your environment. What this does is it really allows you to get another data point, more information into a centralized console. So from there, if you're trying to figure out how an attacker got in, possibly perform some sort of timeline or forensic investigation, this is more data to help support that investigation to get things going. And we've also introduced what we call the Veeam Instant API. So what's really neat about this is it'll be able to work with existing XDR, MDR tools in your environment, for example. And these tools can actually reach out to Veeam, backup and replication, say, hey, you know what? We found a threat on this machine. They'll be able to ping it, and we could do things, for example, like all of a sudden perform a quick backup of that affected machine. Why would you want that? Well, for one, going back to what I was saying about the first bullet point, we want to bring detection as close to real time as we can. If we're able to grab that back up in the machine as soon as a threat's detected, we're hopefully able to recover data potentially at the file level before it's encrypted. Additionally, it's also important to know that, hey, you know what? Here's when it was detected. We got a timestamp. Let's be sure to check backups prior to this timestamp, see if they're clean or not. But we also know going forward that there might be issues. This could also be handy if you want to do a forensics investigation. Say, for example, you trigger this quick backup and you dump onto immutable storage. Your security team could go at it and start figuring out what they want to do with this, how they want to approach this attack. So talking about reviewing things that kind of gets you into the respond and recover faster from ransomware discussion. How do we help you achieve this with the new platform release? So one of the biggest challenges when you're recovering from ransomware is you don't want to reintroduce the threat, especially if it's been latent in your environment for a while. You probably have, unfortunately, some backups with this threat already in there. So with the addition of Yara content analysis, we're empowering you to be able to actually go in there and perform a Yara scan against your backup. You'll be able to do this whether it's ad hoc, you can use it as part of a sure backup job, so that's performed automatically. And we also take these results and we're able to leverage them in Veeam Recovery Orchestrator as well. So if you've got a recovery plan already built out for some of your workloads, you can say, hey, you know what? Security team just gave me a new Yara rule. Let's make sure we incorporate that as part of the scan, which is part of the recovery process. And that speaks to automating clean recovery. Because we've got a platform system in place here, we're able to do things, for example, like take all the knowledge that we have about potential infected or suspicious backups from Veeam Backup and Replication and feed that forward to Veeam Recovery Orchestrator. So now when it's time to perform a recovery, we'll already know which recovery points might be infected or suspicious. And we say, just restore the last known clean one without the need to actually go through and perform that scan at the time of recovery, saving you hopefully precious time getting your business back up and running sooner. Now, talking about recovery, we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about Veeam Continuous Data Protection, Veeam CDP. If you're not familiar with this, it's the capability to perform replicas, but we're talking about down to a couple of seconds for replication. So you're able to get those very near real-time restore points that you can pull from. With the newest release, we've introduced the IO Anomaly Visualizer, which will actually give you a visual representation of how many writes have there been performed down to the second. So if, for example, all of a sudden you get a notification that there might be malware on the machine, you can pull up your CDP replica and roll it back to the point to prior when the infection started, when all these write IOs started occurring. You may not necessarily want to restore that right away. Maybe you will. Maybe you've got a tool to remediate it. But alternatively, you can also perform an application level item recovery. So if you need to pull out some Active Directory objects, for example, or you can also perform a file level recovery from these CDP replicas now. So lots of power there. Now, that's all fine and dandy for when you're under attack and when you're trying to recover. But let's actually also talk about what you could do from a day two operation standpoint. What can you do every day to kind of ensure your success in the face of danger? So we've implemented what we call Four Eyes admin protection. If you're not familiar with the Four Eyes protection principle, it's a form of authorization where if somebody goes in and performs, let's say, a destructive action such as deleting backups or deleting a repository, it will now require a second backup administrator to actually confirm that action. It also applies to things like adding new users to Veeam backup and replication. So even if an attacker is able to get past the MFA and they go in there and they try to add another user to bypass the Four Eyes, that won't happen because they would still need that successful second account in order to authorize that. I touched on the best practices analyzer earlier. That's now known as the security and compliance analyzer. We've dramatically increased the number of checks that we're performing, and some of them are Veeam specific. Some of them are just general best practices for your data protection. We could do things like check for, hey, some of your jobs aren't adhering to the 3-2-1 rule. They don't have a copy of the backup somewhere. Or maybe you're not using immutability. That's something that should be flagged. So the great thing with this is you can perform an ad hoc. So you can run the scan, make a change, run it again, make sure you get the green check mark. You can run on the schedule if you want to run it once a week to make sure everything is still green. But you can also have it automatically emailed to yourself or possibly to, let's say, a compliance officer. Maybe they're asking you regularly, hey, we need to validate that we're in a good state. This can hopefully make your job easier. And lastly, we want to shine the spotlight on malware. If you have risks in your environment, whether it's a risk to achieving your SLA or RPO anomalies, or maybe just an idea of where are the threats from a backup perspective, we've introduced the Veeam Threat Center, which is powered by Veeam One. So as part of the Veeam Data Platform Advanced and Premium solutions, you'll be able to access this all-in-one dashboard. And the great thing about this is the dashboard's actually available throughout the platform, assuming you have Veeam One. So you'll be able to access it from Veeam One, obviously, but it's actually baked right into the Veeam Backup Replication console and will be available in the Veeam Recovery Orchestrator console as well. So we've talked a lot about the different types of scanning that we could perform. We've got the inline scanner. We're leveraging our already existing guest file indexing to look at those files as well to say things like, hey, you know what? We found a whole bunch of known ransomware files, whether it's ransomware notes or file extensions. We're leveraging that technology now, and we're using rules for those that can be updated fairly regularly. But we're also still taking the tried and true AV scan that we've had for a few years now, and we're also adding the Yara scan. So the thing that's worth noting is that you'll have the capability to use either Yara and or AV scan. So you can use both of them, which will really give you the power that you need. Emily, what are your thoughts on the new scanning capabilities? I know they're game changers, and everyone has their own thoughts and opinions on where the values really lie here.
Yeah, no, I mean, I see value in all of them, right? Because not only did we talk about earlier how it's so important to have multiple tools at your disposal, but now being able to leverage those tools with your backups as well, right? So the Yara scan, being able to work with your security team and get those actual Yara rules that you need and be able to scan those across multiple backups. The AV scan is something we've been doing for almost 4 or 5 years now. I remember talking about this when it first was released. And this was always something that I believe customers love to be able to leverage because now it was a way for us just to take those updated definitions and scan those on a backup. But, again, giving us some of these additional enhancements for security driven purposes, I think is going to be huge for the market and for end users to be able to, again, help them be able to be able to recover from an incident cleaner and more effectively.
Absolutely. I mean, this is all great stuff, and I'm sure everyone watching is waiting for the demos. So why don't we kick our way into the demos to actually see this stuff in action?
Yeah, absolutely. So why don't we start with the day two operation? So you mentioned, again, having that secure, compliant protection for your data. So here we're just going to walk through, right, kind of that first step, which is the new Four Eyes authorization. So what you'll see here inside of this demo is this is where you can actually set up all of your user roles. So essentially bringing in those end users for who has access to what, but now you'll have that checkbox for Four Eyes authorization. So you can determine, how many days they have to either approve or reject a request for if somebody is performing some type of action within the console. So let's say, for example, I'm going to go ahead and delete this backup. And you can see there's going to be a pop-up that shows that says, hey, just so you know, another administrator is going to have to approve it. Would you like to go ahead and move forward? I hit OK. And now we have a backup that's sitting and pending for approval. You can see the details of this here, but essentially I can't do anything with this until an administrator comes in and actually approves this request. Now I can reject it, so let's say that was done by accident, I can at least remove it from here. Next, we have the security and compliance analyzer. So building on from that best practices analyzer. So you can see there's a lot more additional items that get added in here. So this is going to run through that check. And it's going to start looking at, again, backup infrastructure security. What are some things in here that maybe we need to go through and fix? Maybe there's some different items in here that we have made decisions on based off of our environment, and we should probably suppress these notifications because it's something we're not going to change. You can make that change there, and then it'll show up underneath that tab as an item that's being suppressed. You also have your best practices for product configuration, right? So, hey, I didn't have MFA turned on. That's something that I need to have implemented. Matt mentioned having the 32110 rule. Again, these are going to be all best practices that Veeam's looking at. There's your option to do the scheduler. So we can go ahead and schedule this to run on a certain day or week and then have that emailed out to the end user. And finally, we have Veeam Threat Center. So if we come in, we have this new dashboard that's going to go ahead and tell you how is this backup server being monitored by which Veeam1 server. Veeam Threat Center, you're going to have this data platform scorecard. So it's going to show you, what your percentage is from having a secured environment, of having backups, and that side of things. You also have the backup by anomaly. So if there's anything happening in that environment, underneath our overview tab, you just get this nice overview of all of the production environment, what that looks like. And then you have a heat map as well as a job calendar. So really cool items to see inside of the Veeam Threat Center, right? Especially when we start looking at this from how do we be more proactive in our environment, especially because this is running off of Veeam 1. The nice thing about that is we're able to leverage all of those reporting and alarm capabilities that are already built into Veeam 1 and pull some of that information back down. So the nice thing about Veeam Threat Center is, again, everything that you see in Veeam 1 is going to be the same within Veeam Backup Replication and Veeam Recovery Orchestrator. These numbers aren't going to change. Essentially, it's looking at the same environment. One thing I didn't point out, right, is that malware detection. So here you have this nice map that's going to showcase, okay, if we did run a scan, whether it was a Yara scan, a AV scan, or inline detection, or the Veeam incident API that marks something from an external user, or the file indexing, right? There's so many different ways that we can identify potential threats as part of a backup. Well, when we do identify a threat, know that we're going to go ahead and we're going to mark that restore point as potentially being infected or suspicious, or we could also mark it as clean if it was a false positive. If it is marked as infected or suspicious, you're going to see that as a heat map here, and it's going to show you where that is located in this specific location at part of what backup repository. So keep this in mind for those of you that have multiple Veeam backup and replication servers or repositories, right, across different sites or regions. This is going to help to determine, if you have a potential issue or vulnerability at a particular site, how you can identify that again and, ensure that everybody is aware of those potential issues. So we're going to go next into what some of those demos for scanning look like. So let's talk about the detect and identify portion. So this is going to be that inline detection scanner that Matt mentioned earlier. So let's take a look at how that looks like in the Veeam environment itself. So again, if I go up to my top, you're going to have this new tab that says malware detection. And this is going to be where you can turn on that encryption detection. Again, we're going to be using machine learning. So we taught the Veeam engine, right, how to start to understand or identify different types of threats or different types of anomalies that are happening within the backup itself, especially during the backup job process. Now you have the opportunity here to set your sensitivity rate. So if you set it to extreme, there might be potential for false positives, but you can drop it down to low, depending on what you feel comfortable with. Underneath that, you have that suspicious activity detection, which is done from the files. So again, leveraging guest file system indexing to actually search through those files themselves for known ransomware notes and or suspicious deletion of files themselves. Next, you'll have the Veeam Incident API. So this is going to be your way to leverage those external tools to be able to come in and mark those backups if they find something suspicious, as well as maybe even perform that quick backup of the virtual machine that might be getting encrypted at that point in time. And then if you want to see what this looks like, right? So this is one of my example backup jobs. If I were to scroll down, you're going to see here is that it's running that inline detection for the malware scan. So it does it the first time once just to get a good baseline to understand how this workload operates. And then the next few times afterwards, it's going to be able to start understanding what changes or deltas are happening to identify threats. When you do identify a threat, you'll see it pop up here in this inventory. I'm not going to go too deep in that because we're going to talk about the next demo. Underneath our options, you're going to have your option for event forwarding. So this is where you can go ahead and you can plug in your syslog server and we can start forwarding events to your SIM tool of choice. So this could be, again, the events for the malware, inline malware scan that's happening, or the AV scan that's happening, or if somebody's or if backup jobs aren't running, or if they're failing, whatever those events may be, you can forward those out to that third-party tool of your choosing. So you can either do that here inside of the backups, or you can also do it in Veeam 1. So you can actually connect to your Veeam One dashboard from the Veeam Backup and Replication server. So again, same exact dashboard, but let's go into the monitoring client. So here's all of our alarms that are available inside of Veeam One. If I go to server settings, you're going to see this option for syslog. So you can enable syslog, again, point to your syslog server, and then all these alarms, there's over 200 plus, that you can have forwarded up to your syslog server and have that be collected from your SIM tool. You also have the option to integrate this with ServiceNow. So I can plug in my ServiceNow instance, and I can have all of these events again be forwarded into ServiceNow, have tickets be created, things of that nature. The nice thing about the ServiceNow integration is it's truly bidirectional, meaning that if we create a ticket in ServiceNow and somebody go ahead and remedies that ticket and remedies that alarm that was technically what was created from Veeam One, that remedy or that remediation will go back to Veeam One, and it'll automatically go ahead and fix it for you there too. So you're not having to go and manage between both platforms. Whatever you do in ServiceNow will go ahead and remediate that from Veeam One and vice versa. So you have some of that, additional integration that's built in between both prospective companies. So now that we've identified, we've gone through the detection and day 2 operations, last but not least is going to be respond and recover faster from ransomware attacks. So let's look at what Yara content analysis looks like. So here what we're going to do is we're just going to go ahead and select one of our backups. Now, if I select one of my backups, you're going to see the option to do what we call is a scan. So if I right click, we could do a scan backup. This is going to give you your options for how we want to have the scan take place. So we're understanding that we want to find the last available clean restore point, and we want to leverage either an AV definition, or maybe we want to leverage a specific YARA rule that was given to me from my security team. So I can go ahead and I can select that YARA rule from here. I can also choose a specific range. So if my security team tells me that, hey, this happened in between these sets of dates, maybe we want to do the scan here, I could do that here as well. This example, we're just going to go ahead and leave it as find the most recent restore points, leverage this YARA rule, as well as leverage the AV definition and perform the scan. If we hit OK, it's going to start that entire process of first, we're going to go ahead and we're going to do the scanning with the AV definition. And then next, we're going to go ahead and leverage the YARA rule. In your inventory tab, you're going to see once that has detected that possible infected restore point, it's going to show up here. If I wanted to see what it was possibly is that it captured it of, I could hit the history tab, right? And it's going to show me, hey, the detection source was through an AV scan. We found something on here to assume that this is infected. So you can then further on either, let's say it was a false positive, you can mark it as clean, or you can go ahead and you can make your decisions of how you want to recover that data if you do. So if we're going to go talk about recovery, so you can either do that ad hoc or you can do that through Veeam Recovery Orchestrator. So here I'm going to show you that I have a recovery plan that's already built for some of my virtual machines. If I was to kick off a recovery plan to start restoring these workloads, not only can I go ahead and choose to recover it to a specific location, but I could also do that malware scan here as well. So I can scan those restore points for possible malware, and I can set a specific amount of points that I want to look at, but I can also just have Veeam Recovery Orchestrator look for those potential malware flags. So I already have that one that's already marked. So it's going to see that from a Veeam Recovery Orchestrator, maybe say, we're not even going to look at that one because we already know it's infected. But here you have the option again, do the virus scan, or again, leverage a YARA rule if you're choosing. Once you do that, you can go ahead and hit finish, and then this is going to go through that process of recovering that workload, but when it's doing the recovery, again, finding those additional items. And finally, CDP. So if we were to look at our CDP replicas, if I were to select my restore point, you'll have the option here to see that IO anomalizer, right? So this is going to be able to showcase if I wanted to roll back a CDP replica to a specific point in time, I can do that based off of, if I start to see large amounts of IO spikes happening on this workload, since this is being replicated on a 15-second basis, right? That's going to be my options for rolling this back on from those different types of recovery points. So I could do that from a full VM image side, right, like Matt mentioned, but I could also do this from guest file system indexing side. So if I wanted to restore specific guest files from a specific point in time, I can do that and roll it back to that specific point and then start the process of recovering those files. So Matt, I think I tried to do 3 tiles in 3 minutes each. I think I hit it. I don't know. But what are some of your favorites, I guess, from the demo so far?
Honestly, I've always loved CDP going back to my customer days. Having CDP as part of Veeam backup and replication made it easily accessible to me, right? I didn't necessarily have to set apart separate funds to get big, expensive hardware, expensive storage arrays, all that sort of stuff. I could leverage the product that I already had. So seeing the improvements to CDP, like I don't think we even talked about Sure Replica, the Veeam Explorers support, being able to pull out application level items. So for example, I could restore something from Active Directory from a CDP replica. Like I just find that so cool. But I mean, at the end of the day, I think he hit the nail on the head in that there are just so many improvements and enhancements with this release that this is only a partial list. The release is out now. You can go find it on veeam.com. There's the What's New doc is available. Last I checked, there was over 20 pages of new features and enhancements, and that's just for Veeam backup and replication. That doesn't even cover the whole platform. If you're looking to download a trial is available. You can download one file, one ISO to get the entire premium platform installed. Give the tires a kick. Existing users, you can find the new bits available through your My account. If you're just looking to try something new, but you don't want to set aside the time to set up the infrastructure, we've got lots of hands-on labs where you could go through. There's lab guides available. If you want to just poke around, you could go off the trail from the lab guides. Short version is head to veeam.com today. Lots available there. Lots of new features. Emily, anything else that you want to add before we head into Q&A?
No. No, I think we're good. I think we covered it.
Perfect. So I did see a few questions come in here as we are recording. So first off, one I see here is, I see mention of support for NSXT on that slide with all the features. Can you elaborate? Yeah, short version is basically Sure Backup now supports NSXT. So if that's part of your environment and you want to run a Sure Backup job, you can actually go in there and it's fully supported now. Next question I see here is around VRO. One of the challenges that we see today is when we restore things, particularly to Azure, sometimes we need some post-restore operations performed. Is there anything that we could do for that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, I think we only covered Veeam Recovery Orchestrator very briefly, right? But there was tons of new enhancements that came with it. Part of that is the additional option to provide scripts available into your Azure virtual machine, so that way you can go ahead and do those post-restore operations. So there is that built into Veeam Recovery Orchestrator version 7, as well as the additional options to do some CDP testing.
Yeah, absolutely. VRO 7, it's a major release for all the products. VRO 7 is seeing a lot of enhancements, and we're seeing tremendous feedback from customers, a lot of excitement about that. So with that, we're going to wrap things up. We still see a few more questions coming in here. We'll do our best to stick around and answer those. If we don't get to them, we'll see what we can do offline. But thank you very much for joining us today, Emily. Thanks for joining me and going through this great work. And yeah, head to veeam.com today to learn more.
All right. Well, thanks so much for an awesome session, Matt and Emily. Great information presented today. I love the VDP respond and recover technology. I mean, that just looks fantastic in this era of ubiquitous ransomware. We appreciate having you both on and spreading your knowledge with us. Love the demos and everything else you did today. It was just great to be enlightened about what Veeam is up to. Always such a cutting edge company. And we are now almost done, everyone. But before we wrap up, we do have one more piece of business to attend to. That is the Amazon gift card prize drawing for $250. As I mentioned earlier, you do have to be in attendance during the entire event to be eligible. And the winner of this $250 gift card is Logan Coffee from Kentucky. Congratulations to you, Logan. Excellent. We will be in touch with you ASAP to get you that gift card and hopefully help you a little bit with your Christmas shopping. And with that, folks, on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to thank Veeam for making this event possible. I want to thank all of you attendees for being on with us. You've heard me say this before, but I sincerely enjoy spending time with you and learning with you because I learned so much from these as well. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I will look forward to seeing you in the next event. Bye, everyone.